Good morning. My name is Tayo Renchaway, and I'm the Director of Business Development for VersaFile. I'm joined this morning by Greg Soltis, the DocuFlow Product Manager. Thank you for joining us this morning for our webinar, 3 Opportunities to Enhance Your SAP S4 Migration. And we're going to focus specifically on using a modern archive link solution to get a head start. With that, we'll jump right in. So today's reality is that clients have 7 years to move off of their SAP ECC implementation to S4HANA. But what's interesting is that originally the date was 2025, and SAP recognized that most of their clients would not be able to achieve that timeline, so they extended it to 2027, and they also added 3 years of extended support to taking that out to 2030. The key takeaway from that is that this is not a simple migration. In fact, the average migration project takes from 11 to 18 months, depending on the size of the organization, the complexity of the implementation, the number of SAP modules, etc. So in addition to the 12 to 18 months, and some projects have in fact taken longer, it still takes several years of preparation and planning before the migration actually starts. So migrating from ECC to S4HANA is a multi-year, multifaceted effort that is ripe with risk around timeline, change management, and of course, costs. Most organizations consider the project to be a massive one. And if you happen to be in an organization that's considering this, I suspect you will have found that this has been in the planning works for months, if not years already, and you may be finding these data points extremely familiar. Because of this, organizations struggle to create a compelling business case to fund the initiative and the program based purely on this is going out of support. And so CFOs and boards are typically kicking this down the road in the absence of a compelling business value that will add more to their company's bottom line or to the overall benefit than simply we'll be back in support. And so the real question that gets laid out is, how do you mitigate risk? How do you reduce costs? And how do you eliminate end user impact and deliver greater business value on your move from ECC to S4? One way is to use Archive Link. And so if you're not familiar with Archive Link, built into ECC and into S4HANA is an archiving interface called Archive Link, which enables storing content and data outside of the SAP database. Historically, this was considered a best practice, although not all clients did it. Even those that have formal repositories for their SAP content often find when they go to migrate their environments that users have stored content in their database. So in the ECC world, although it had performance implications, it was passable. You could get away with it. In the in-memory database of HANA, however, this will be extremely expensive, and storing content outside of SAP is no longer considered a best practice, but frankly, it's a necessity. So how does a modern archive link approach to a migration actually help reduce costs and solve some of these problems? Modern archive link solutions go a step farther than simply enabling you to get stuff out of SAP, but they provide a bidirectional metadata transfer, which opens up the capability for enterprise task and process automation, leveraging the information that I like to call the crown jewels of the organization that resides in SAP. So a modern archive link approach can reduce risk, it can drive down costs, and if we can enable this process and task automation, it can increase value to the organization. When we start to bring these things together, we start to drive a positive business case. So let's focus for a moment on driving down costs. You can realize significant savings by consolidating your repositories, both in maintenance, software licensing, hardware, and ongoing support. Most clients have at least 2, if not 3, sometimes 5 repositories, including file shares, the database. If they have grown through acquisition, they may have FileNet, they may have OpenText, they may have Documentum. And so bringing this down to one repository obviously has some significant value in terms of reduction of costs. When you arrive in your HANA database, your costs will be considerably less if, of course, you're archiving to an external repository. And like moving your home, it's much less expensive to clean house before you move. The move itself is less expensive, and you get a chance to organize your data and drive more business value with less risk. As we move to reducing risk, business disruption always carries risk. And anyone that has done an SAP project knows that historically there is business disruption. It is a massive project, end users are effective, business processes are effective. So if you can leverage solutions that are implemented in advance of your move to HANA, it makes the migration of content and data seamless, and it makes it transparent to end users, which of course is an excellent way to reduce friction and business disruption if that piece of the migration is taken off the table and end users are not impacted. So it basically gives you one less item to worry about for your go live. Increasing value, which is the third bullet, spending millions on a new stable version of anything without delivering tangible business benefits doesn't typically sit well with the executive. So by leveraging an archive link-based solution, you can expose SAP content and data for use in the business processes outside of SAP, enabling automated end-to-end workflows, streamlining operations, and increasing business efficiencies. It also sets the organization up for unifying the content experience across other SAP modules and products like Ariba and Salesforce. So using an archive link approach can reduce custom code. It can help automate tasks that are not automated today, and it can help create a better user, client, and vendor experience, which translates to efficiency, productivity, and a streamlined business process. For those of you that have made or are contemplating making investments in IBM in the DBA or CP4A platform, the DocuFlow ICC SAP extension layers into the stack to expose core SAP content and inform the business process with content and data. And so whether that's a couple of examples on the screen, lead to cash, source to pay, design to operate, frankly, any of the use cases that your organization may have SAP implemented for today can benefit from exposing that content to the broader enterprise. And without having to give SAP licenses to individuals, without having to do the training for SAP, just exposing the core information that a given business unit needs has tremendous value. And so DocuFlow sits in the middle and is integrated into the stack to provide that connectivity between your IBM investment and your SAP investment. Taking a slightly different view, if you've seen this slide from IBM CP4A and the DocuFlow ICC SAP extension. Quick view of where we typically see organizations benefit from leveraging the SAP integration. So on the workflow side, as we've just talked about, enhancing the business process with SAP content and data. On the content side, adding additional metadata, whether that's for records management purposes, governance, or just orchestration across the organization. And on the capture side, and Greg is actually going to show you one of the ways that SAP information can be leveraged in the capture process or across, frankly, any of the IBM stack. And from a deployment model perspective, of course, we can deploy on-prem, we can deploy to the cloud, or in a hybrid manner. So just to recap this part of our session, the three opportunities that can help contribute to your ROI or business case is by using Archive Link, or specifically a modern bidirectional Archive Link interface, we can help reduce implementation costs and risk. We can save on legacy costs, and we can open up digital automation opportunities through task and process automation. And those three things in combination with, oh, we need to do this anyway, certainly start to make a more compelling business case for executives and boards to sign off on earlier rather than later, which can benefit your business. So we're going to now move to a demonstration. Greg's going to give you a couple of examples of what we've been talking about here. Over to you, Greg.
Thanks, Tyle. All right, everybody should be able to see my screen now. And for those that aren't familiar with SAP, this is what it looks like. We're going to do a quick demo today. We're actually going to do two different components. One, a super small migration from SAP ECC over to S4, leveraging P8 as a backend repository. And the second part of the demo is going to be more around process automation. We're going to add some content, actually an accounts payable invoice, into P8 and have it automatically park inside of SAP S4 with metadata transfer. So that kind of sets the stage. So first, let's look at the migration. And first, I do want to preface, DocuFlow is an entire suite of functionality. We're just choosing two components of it today to show you. Looking at the migration, the migrations that we've seen from our customers from SAP ECC to S4 take two different forms, and often both at the same time, meaning you will often take your SAP ECC system and create your S4 instance from that. As well, there might be a period of time after you've done so until you actually go live to the business with that. Why I bring that into the context of this discussion is the DocuFlow migration utility, which is an SAP-centric migration utility, handles both scenarios. It can take content from your SAP database, from any archive link source, such as SharePoint, document, and so on and so forth, as well as your file system. And if it's linked to SAP, it can actually migrate that out to P8, send the metadata and enhance the metadata as it does so, and take care of all the linkages. So that's a scenario that you would do prior to during your road to S4 and prior to that S4 instance being created. But after the fact, when that S4 is created, you still might have business activity in your original system, and you might want to do the delta from that. So again, I'm going to show you kind of both those in one file swoop today. And without further ado, let's go ahead. So I'm inside of SAP ECC. First, let's go we're just going to look at a piece of equipment, and let's look at the attachments assigned to that piece of equipment. And right now I'm looking at SAP ECC. Well, we see three different ones here. One, we see an SAP database note, we see an SAP database attachment, and we see an attachment that's actually stored out in SharePoint. DocuFlow has that ability to talk to any of those content repositories, including the database, and move it over to S4. With that, I'm just going to jump over to my S4 screen, and let's look at the attachment for that piece of equipment. And we see that there's nothing there yet. So let's go ahead and do the migration. Back to the migrator inside of SAP. Let's take a look at the documents that I have already prepared for the demo. And let's just go back into the migrator here. And let's just select the piece of equipment that I have. There we go. And here we see the three documents that we're going to move: the note, the attachment, and the SharePoint document. With just a click, we're going to go ahead and store that content out in P8. It's going to take the metadata that's from the source system, apply that in P8, and also redo all the different linkages that are involved. Now, in terms of performance, we see leveraging the SAP runtime system, anywhere from 2 to 5 documents per second is our throughput. So you can get, leveraging the SAP runtime system, you can get some really decent performance for your high volume migrations. Okay, with that, let's go over and jump over to our ECC system, and we'll let these migrate over and just give it one more minute. Always happens with the live demo. There we go. Working from home, those type of things, and we're completed. So we see here the migrator indicates to us all the different steps that it's done. It's read the metadata, it's enhanced it, and it's thrown over to P8. Let's go ahead and refresh our P8 screen. Here we see our three documents. If we look at one of these documents real quick, not only was the content moved, but here we see a very simple sample set of SAP metadata that was applied to the document as it was migrated. So it's all done in one unit of work. If we go back to our piece of equipment inside of ECC, there we see the 3 new linkages that are now to your P8 repository. And again, anytime you want to view a document, you simply double click and it's brought up from P8 now instead of the SAP database. Obviously, we've got these 3 historical links, and part of the migration utility is to take care, and you can actually hide or delete those links as well as the source content as well when you're done. Lastly, we're going to go over to our S4 system, and let me refresh that list. And now we see those 3 links. So not only does the migrator allow for the migration within your ECC system to P8, but also to handle that second scenario all the way up to SAP S4. Okay, with that, that concludes the migration portion of the demo. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip to the second one. And for this example, I'm going to take an invoice, and I've already got it prepped inside of P8. And we're just going to add a few properties here. You'll notice that some of the metadata properties are blank on purpose, and some are already populated. You know, really DocuFlow can look at content in your P8 system that is new, that has been versioned, that is any part of a BAW workflow, any ingestion method or process that adds or changes content, either at the content level or at the metadata level. DocuFlow can be configured to go over to SAP and do what it's configured to do. We call it our do anything pipe into SAP. Again, to recap, for this example, we're just going to go in and automatically park this invoice inside of SAP S4 to automate your business process in accounts payable. The one thing I do want to do is I did leave the purchase order blank. And this is an interesting one because we notice that as I do type ahead values here, we are getting possible values in your drop-down list. Well, as all of you know, P8 has choice lists built-in functionality with your platform. DocuFlow in SAP has a direct connection into your P8 choice lists. What does this mean? We can send SAP data to P8 in the form of P8 choice lists. So then you have these values from within your P8 database to be able to perform not only dropdowns, but data validation. So if we think about that, that can be leveraged in DataCap, that can be leveraged in Case, that can be leveraged in any content navigator or other CP4A compatible methods. You will have these SAP values available to you in choice lists. No need for third-party databases, as well as some other things that we've seen out there in the workforce. Okay, so with that, I'm going to select this purchase order number, and I'm going to go ahead and save this invoice. And DocuFlow recognizes that, and now it's going to go over into SAP and do what it's meant to do. For that, let's go over, and this is going to be our first glimpse into SAP S4HANA from the Fiori aspect. In the new world of SAP, there are 2 interfaces. There's the historical one that I showed you during the migration, and the newer one, which is based on Fiori apps, is what you're seeing here in the web browser. It's all based on Fiori apps, and we see that this particular tile is our DocuFlow home base within the S4 system. What is our home base? It's kind of our area where all the configuration is done. Here we see the configured integration patterns to and from S4 to P8. It's also the home base for all your reporting and workbenches. We have dashboards such as the choice list module that I mentioned. We have a baked in ICC for SAP integration as the 2 products work together in a lot of scenarios. And we also have full reporting and searching capability within SAP. Everything that happens with DocuFlow and ICC for SAP is reportable from the SAP side within S4 through this Fiori app. For example, here we see the migrated documents I did a few minutes ago, and here we see the inbound invoice that just automatically was parked inside of SAP. So we can actually look at, by drilling down into this report, here's the metadata that we brought into SAP. Again, used for any business process or use case that you can think of across your SAP modules. We're just using the invoice as an example. Here we'll see there's the invoice number that it parked automatically. And when it was done that, it established the link to that invoice and it set a full set of metadata back to P8. Okay, so let's go look at that invoice. If I go look at our S4HANA supplier invoice list, and let's go look for the lists today, or the invoices today. And there's the invoice that was just created. So DocuFlow automatically created this inside of S4. And if we look at the attachment list, there's the one that was linked and attached. Going back to Content Navigator, if I just refresh my screen and I go back and look at those properties, here we see we've got the full set of metadata to complement the metadata that we did on the inbound side. Again, DocuFlow did that bidirectional transfer after it was done. It's processing inside of SAP. We've got our invoice status, there's the SAP invoice number, and so forth. So with that, that's just a short glimpse into some of the functionality that DocuFlow can do for you, especially on your road to S4, on the migration side and the process automation side. With that, Kyle, back to you.
Great, thanks, Greg. Give me just one moment to come back to my screen, if I get the right screen up here. Sorry, 1 second. So, questions while I'm fiddling to try and get my screen back up. We had a couple of questions in, and I'm just checking the chat window as well. How does your solution differ from a traditional archive link solution? Greg, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, you bet. That's a good question. You know, when you think about a traditional archive link solution, it is most often just a very basic set of plumbing in the middleware space. And DocuFlow is much, much more than that. What we call it the 1-2 punch. And we often will refer to that when we're up against in a competitive scenario against or defending against open text, meaning we do have the middleware component between ICC for SAP and DocuFlow. As well, DocuFlow's extensive footprint inside the SAP boundary really takes that basic plumbing of a lot of archive link pieces of middleware, and it makes it, extends it all into your business in terms of the process automation, all the bells and whistles, and it makes it an SAP-centric product suite. Awesome.
And I apologize for my difficulty trying to get the right screen to show here. Another question, does this work with IBM Content Collector for SAP? You want to take that one as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I alluded to it a couple times in the webinar so far, but for sure, ICC for SAP and DocuFlow, you know, DocuFlow was built to really work in conjunction with ICC for SAP. They both have fortes and strengths, and the two together really are that better together product suite to really allow, you know, there hasn't been a use case or that we found, quite honestly, that with using the two products that we can't satisfy customers' requirements.
Perfect. And if there's any interest on seeing kind of a matrix of the ICC capabilities and how DocuFlow adds onto that and how it fits into the broader DBA or CP4A platform, we can certainly share that afterwards. How did you get the content link from ECC to S4HANA?
I think that's another one for me. You know, it's a bit more technical, meaning that our migration utility handles everything from your SAP database and any of those other sources I mentioned, such as SharePoint or Documentum or the file system, gets them over to P8 and establishes all the link. So that's really one bucket of work. But if we look at the DocuFlow suite, and one of its biggest strengths is unrelated to migration in a way, is we have that do anything pipe into SAP. So that's turning the bus around, and that's a P8 up to SAP process. Well, I also mentioned that it doesn't matter how that content gets into P8 or how it's changed or version, so on and so forth. DocuFlow can recognize that. So in this case, it was actually the DocuFlow migration step that added the content to P8. And on the other side of the fence, we had DocuFlow also waiting to watch for that new content, and then it took it up to S4 and linked it to those same pieces of equipment.
Cool. Thanks, Greg. We've got just a couple of minutes left. I have one more slide, and then we'll wrap up the webinar, and thank everyone for their attendance. So VersaFile has been helping clients with IBM and SAP content needs for over 15 years. And as more and more pressure is put on technology investments to deliver, excuse me, meaningful and measurable value to the enterprise, we've been privileged, frankly, to be part of the journey to intelligent automation. So if you're curious about what that journey looks like or could look like, and would like more detailed information or discussion of a particular use case, then we'd be happy to extend our half-day automation first workshop. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. And really what that involves is going through some of your processes and use cases and seeing how content in SAP can be exposed, how, as Greg talked about, some of the capabilities from SAP can be extended into DataCap or into BAW or CASE, or frankly, some of the other topics that may not involve SAP or may touch on SAP, but really how do you look at leveraging the business automation, the digital business automation stack to truly automate various content-centric processes within your organization. So if that's of any interest to you, we would encourage you to reach out. Other than that, we thank you for your time this morning, and we hope that all of you will stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.